tonight we're actually going to talk about what may be the single most important part of transforming facts into meaningful history: storytelling. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the political stories that are being told in this moment, stories that might harm and damage Black communities, and also about the powerful, honest, resilient narratives that Black people can use to resist, to reframe, and to build power in our communities. Listen, even a casual glance at the Twitter feed of influential Black women this afternoon will reveal that this meaning-making narrative work is already in full effect. Take award-winning New York Times Magazine reporter Nikole Hannah-Jones tweeting, "Sent packing by the first Black woman vice president in this history of this land, and millions of nameless Black women all over this land. What a damn day. Just hugged my daughter so tight." Or award-winning filmmaker and storyteller extraordinaire Ava DuVernay, who tweeted out, "Lots of hooping and hollering. It's a moment, folks. Turn on some music and take it in. You are in the midst of history." Now, the enthusiasm of these sisters was shared by world leaders across the globe who weighed in with congratulations for the new president and the historic vice president-elect. Of course, it goes without saying that in an election this hotly contested, in a nation this deeply divided, the enthusiasm we just heard is not universally shared. Indeed, nearly all of President Trump's tweets from the last 10 hours are tagged with a label from Twitter warning, quote, "Some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process." So, what does all of that mean for us? Let me offer a few suggestions. First, I think it means we're going to have to be critical consumers of all stories about this election. Now, I don't quite mean that we need to be on the lookout for fake news. I mean, yes, that is a very real issue. And in fact, on Monday night, we're going to talk much more about technology and disinformation. But right now, in this moment, I'm actually talking about being critical about the frame. So remember, news is always a story. And at its best, news begins with clearly, publicly verifiable facts. But even those facts get woven into a story. Some are emphasized, others recede. So remain critical of frames that suggest, for example, that all Black people think or feel or vote alike, because we don't. Remain critical of frames that say most Black folk get our political cues from hip-hop artists or athletes, because we don't. Remain critical of frames that suggest all Black leaders pursue the same public policies, because they don't. Remain critical of frames that ignore state and local elected offices as though they don't matter, because they do. Remain critical of frames that begin with a deficit model of Black people, describing our communities as vulnerable or at risk. If you need a little help being critical of that, just remember that yes, Black communities are often under attack, both explicitly and implicitly, but take the time to look into the face of an elder who waited in line 9 hours in Atlanta, or a young brother taking time that he really can't even afford to take from a low-wage job, or a sister riding 3 city buses with her baby in a stroller, and each and every one of them on a mission to do one thing: vote. And then tell me that those folks are vulnerable. What I see is powerful. And of course, remain critical of frames that ignore Black people as though we don't exist at all. Because, of course, we do. Which brings me to number 2. We must be, in this moment and moving forward, active creators and storytellers about the truth of this election. You see, high school history books and cable news anchors will lead you to believe that most of what happens in an election is caused by the candidates or by the campaigns. But democracy has always been and always will be about the collective, collaborative work of the people. But far too often, the labor, the strategy, and the genius of Black people is simply erased in stories that focus only on the most obvious and visible players in a contest. Okay, if the headline reads, Biden wins, your job is to ask, how? Let's go back to Black Twitter, shall we? There you will find some pretty badass, historically honest, Black-centered storytelling happening as our community calls the names of organizers in southern states, of community activists in the Midwest, of the community leaders in the Southwest who expanded our democracy so dramatically that it welcomed more than 130 million Americans to cast their votes. And it showed that if we would simply lower the ridiculous and unnecessary barriers to the ballot, that we would have underneath a vibrant democracy full of people prepared to govern with their voices and with their votes. So we must continue to call these names and insert these grassroots stories into the national narrative and refuse to let today's heroes of democracy be transformed into the hidden figures of a whitewashed history. And then finally, expect it to take a little time for the full story to emerge. I know we were waiting a long time and are still waiting for every single vote to be counted. But it's not just about counting the votes, although that's critical. It's also about figuring out what it all means. What does it mean when these candidates win? What does it mean when these parties take control? What does it mean when these new voters show up in the political system? It takes a little while to figure out and learn all the stories, to gather all the meaning of this moment. The facts of historical achievement may seem to happen in just 1 second, but we actually know that they always emerge out of collective struggle. And in exactly the same way, we collectively work to build the stories of each moment. It's the work which we are called to do next. It's the work in which we determine what it all means. And so you can help Color of Change do that work. If you want to join in the work of making meaning, if you want to join in the work of combating false narratives, if you want to join in the work of creating effective, accurate, Black-centered storytelling, please check out Color of Change's narrative reports at our site, colorofchange.org/narrative power. And in fact, the most recent report covers anti-racist protest reporting and protecting Black reporters.